Detective Chief Rebecca Walsh stood in her new driveway, wiping sweat from her forehead as the early morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Moving boxes still cluttered her garage, but today wasn't about unpacking. Today was about getting rid of all the stuff she didn't need anymore. After 22 years of living in a cramped apartment near the police station, Rebecca had finally saved enough to buy a house in Oakwood Heights. It was a nice neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-kept lawns, the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved to each other. Her daughter Amy was thrilled about the better school, and Rebecca was just happy to have a yard. But with a new house came a problem. She had furniture from her old place that didn't fit, kitchen appliances she'd replaced, and boxes of clothes Amy had outgrown. Rebecca wasn't one to waste things. A garage sale made perfect sense. She'd done her homework too. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, which was new to her. In her old apartment complex, you just did what you wanted. But here there were rules. So she read through the entire HOA guidebook one evening, making notes like she was studying for an exam. Garage sales were allowed on weekends. You just had to notify your immediate neighbors at least 48 hours in advance. Simple enough. Rebecca printed flyers, walked to the 6 houses closest to hers, and personally handed them to each neighbor. Most people were friendly about it. One elderly man named Mr. Chen even offered to help her set up tables. She also sent an email to the HOA board, just to cover all her bases. Years of police work had taught her to document everything. If someone said you could do something, get it in writing. If you followed the rules, make sure you could prove it. Friday afternoon, she arranged everything in the garage. Clothes folded neatly, books organized by type, kitchen stuff grouped together. She even priced everything clearly with bright stickers. Rebecca wanted this to go smoothly. Tomorrow was her day off, and she planned to enjoy it. Saturday morning came with clear blue skies. Rebecca was up at 6:30, dragging tables onto the driveway. She set up a card table with a cash box and made coffee in a thermos. By 7 o'clock, everything looked professional. Amy helped for the first hour before getting bored and going back inside to text her friends. The first customers arrived around 7:30. A young couple looking for furniture. A mom with 3 kids who bought most of Amy's old clothes. Mr. Chen stopped by just to chat and ended up buying a lamp. People were friendly. The morning was going great. Then at 8 o'clock, a silver Mercedes pulled up fast, tires squealing slightly as it stopped. Rebecca noticed because that's what cops do. They notice things. Sudden movements. Aggressive behavior. Warning signs. A woman got out of the car like she was on a mission. She was probably in her late 50s, wearing expensive workout clothes that looked like they'd never seen actual exercise. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her sunglasses probably cost more than Rebecca's entire garage sale would make. The woman didn't walk. She marched, straight up the driveway with her phone already in her hand, taking pictures of everything. The tables, the price tags, the cars parked along the street. She was documenting this like it was a crime scene. Rebecca had dealt with difficult people her entire career. Angry suspects, hostile witnesses, lawyers who thought they were smarter than everyone else. She knew how to stay calm, so when the woman stopped right in front of her table and cleared her throat loudly, Rebecca just smiled. "Good morning," Rebecca said pleasantly. "Looking for anything specific?" The woman didn't smile back. "Do you have permission for this?" Rebecca kept her expression neutral. "Yes, I followed all the HOA guidelines. Filed the proper notice on Wednesday." The woman's eyes narrowed behind her expensive sunglasses. "I'm Diane Holbrook. I'm on the HOA board, and I don't recall approving any garage sale. The guidelines say we need to notify neighbors and the board," Rebecca explained patiently. "I sent an email Wednesday afternoon to the board email address listed in the handbook. Would you like me to show you?" Diane waved her hand dismissively. "This neighborhood has standards. We can't just have people turning their driveways into flea markets whenever they feel like it." A customer who'd been looking at books quietly stepped away, clearly uncomfortable. Rebecca felt a flash of annoyance but pushed it down. She'd handled worse than an uptight HOA board member. "I understand about standards," Rebecca said. "That's why I made sure to follow every rule. Everything's organized, prices are clearly marked, and I'll be done by 5 o'clock as stated in the guidelines." Diane pulled out her phone and started typing furiously, her thumbs moving fast across the screen. "We'll see about that. I'm reporting this to the entire board. And if you're causing any traffic issues or noise complaints, I'll have this shut down immediately. There's no traffic issue, Rebecca pointed out. And it's 8 in the morning on a Saturday. I'm not exactly throwing a party, but Diane wasn't listening. She was too busy taking more photos, walking around the driveway like an inspector. She photographed Rebecca's address number, the items on the tables, even the folding chairs Rebecca had set up. Then she got back in her Mercedes and drove off, phone pressed to her ear. Mr. Chen, who'd been watching from his yard, shook his head and walked over. Don't worry about Diane. She's like that with everyone. Last month, she reported me for having my trash cans out 15 minutes too long. Said it was lowering property values. Rebecca laughed, but it wasn't really funny. She seems intense. Intense is one word for it, Mr. Chen said. She's reported half the neighborhood for something or other. My wife's friend got a violation notice for having the wrong color mailbox. It was black instead of dark bronze. Nobody could tell the difference, but Diane could. Over the next hour, Rebecca noticed several neighbors slowing down when they drove past, glancing at the garage sale nervously. Word was spreading. A few people stopped by and apologized, saying they'd love to look, but didn't want to upset Diane. Around 10:30, Rebecca's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize with a local area code. Hello? Hi, is this Rebecca Walsh? A man's voice, friendly but stressed. Yes, who's this? This is Tom Peterson. I'm the HOA president. Listen, I got your email on Wednesday and everything was fine. Your garage sale is completely legitimate, but Diane has filed 3 separate complaints in the past 2 hours. Rebecca closed her eyes and counted to 3. 3 complaints? About what? Well, let's see. Unauthorized commercial activity, creating traffic congestion, and, attracting undesirable elements to the neighborhood. Tom sounded embarrassed reading that last one. I know it's ridiculous, but Diane is threatening to escalate this. She says she's going to call the police if you don't shut down. The police? Rebecca almost laughed. For a garage sale that has proper permits? I know. Look, between you and me, Diane does this kind of thing all the time. She means well, I think, but she takes the rules way too seriously. Would you be willing to wrap up early? Maybe by 2 instead of 5? Just to keep the peace? Rebecca felt her jaw tighten. She didn't like bullies. Didn't like people who used rules as weapons. Didn't like backing down when she hadn't done anything wrong. But she was new to the neighborhood. She didn't want to start a war on her first month here. Fine, she said. I'll wrap up by 2. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And welcome to the neighborhood. Despite Diane, it really is a nice place. Rebecca hung up and looked at her tables full of stuff. She'd made about $80 so far. Not much, but it wasn't really about the money. It was about the principle. She'd followed the rules, done everything right. And now some board member with too much time on her hands was going to ruin her Saturday. But if there was one thing Rebecca had learned in 22 years of police work, it was to pick your battles. This wasn't worth fighting over. She'd finish by 2, take whatever didn't sell to a donation center and move on with her life. Around noon, the Mercedes returned. Diane got out with a clipboard and a measuring tape. Actually measuring things. She measured the distance from Rebecca's table to the sidewalk, the width of the signs. She was taking notes like she was investigating a major crime. Several customers who'd been browsing left quickly, not wanting to be part of whatever was happening. Rebecca just watched, arms crossed, as Diane documented every tiny detail. Your table is 6 inches too close to the sidewalk, Diane announced. That's a violation of city code. That's not a real code, Rebecca said quietly. And this sign. Diane pointed at Rebecca's handwritten garage sale poster. It's not the approved HOA color scheme. There's no approved color scheme for garage sale signs. Diane's face flushed red. I'm calling the police right now. This has gone far enough. You're clearly breaking multiple codes, and when the police get here, they'll shut you down. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, standing right there in the driveway, making sure Rebecca could hear every word. Yes, I need to report a disturbance. There's a garage sale causing problems in our neighborhood. Oakwood Heights, 342 Maple Street. Yes, I'll wait for officers. Thank you. Diane ended the call and smiled smugly. Let's see what the police have to say about all this. Rebecca took a deep breath and said nothing. She just waited, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth because she had a feeling this was about to get very interesting. 20 minutes felt like an hour. Diane stood at the end of the driveway with her arms crossed, checking her watch every 30 seconds. A few neighbors had come out of their houses, sensing drama. Mr. Chen stayed on his porch, watching with concern. Rebecca just kept organizing her tables, acting like nothing was wrong. The thing about being a cop for over 2 decades is you learn patience. You learn to stay calm when everyone else is losing it. Rebecca had sat through countless stakeouts, waited hours for suspects to make a move, and spent entire days in court waiting to testify. 20 minutes was nothing. She could see Diane getting more irritated as time passed. The woman kept glancing down the street, clearly expecting sirens and flashing lights, like the police were going to show up for a garage sale with their lights blazing and guns drawn. Finally, a patrol car turned onto Maple Street. No sirens, no lights, just a regular police cruiser rolling slowly up to the house. 2 officers got out, and Rebecca recognized them immediately. Officer Mike Reeves was in his early 30s, a solid cop who'd worked in the patrol division for about 6 years. Good instincts, good with people. Rebecca had personally recommended him for a commendation last year after he talked down a suicidal teenager on a bridge. Officer Jennifer Torres was newer, only 3 years on the force, but sharp as a tack. She'd worked several cases with Rebecca's detective unit, helping with witness interviews and evidence collection. Smart, thorough, and didn't take shortcuts. Both officers walked up the driveway with their professional faces on, ready to handle whatever domestic dispute or neighborhood complaint they'd been called about. Mike had his notepad out, and Jennifer was scanning the scene, taking everything in. Then Mike looked at Rebecca, really looked at her. His eyes went wide and he stopped walking so suddenly that Jennifer almost bumped into him. "Chief Walsh?" Mike's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Chief, what are you? Is this your house?" Jennifer's head snapped around. "Wait, Chief. Chief Walsh lives here?" Rebecca gave them a small nod, trying not to smile. "Hey, Mike, Jennifer." "Yeah, just moved in last month. This is my new place." Diane's confident expression flickered. She stepped forward, her voice still demanding, but with a hint of uncertainty creeping in. "Chief? What chief? I don't care what her title is. She's breaking HOA rules and city codes, multiple violations. I documented everything." Mike and Jennifer both turned to look at Diane, then back at Rebecca. You could see them trying to process this, their boss, their actual boss, the head of the entire detective division, being reported for having a garage sale. Jennifer spoke first, her voice carefully professional but with a hint of disbelief. "Ma'am, you called 911 to report Detective Chief Walsh for having a garage sale?" "I don't know who she is," Diane snapped. "I called because there's a disturbance. Rules are rules. Nobody is above them." Mike was biting his lip, clearly trying not to laugh. He pulled himself together and turned to Rebecca. "Chief, do you have the proper permits for this sale?" "I do," Rebecca said calmly. "I followed every HOA guideline, notified neighbors 48 hours in advance, sent email confirmation to the board. Everything's documented." "May I see the documentation?" Mike asked, still maintaining his professional tone, even though this whole situation was absurd. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed him the email she'd sent to the HOA board, complete with timestamp and read receipts. She also showed him the HOA handbook section about garage sales with her highlighted notes. Mike examined everything carefully while Jennifer took out her own notepad. Diane was getting redder by the second, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This all looks in order," Mike said finally. He turned to Diane. "Ma'am, can you show me the specific violations you mentioned?" Diane fumbled with her phone, pulling up the photos she'd taken. "Look, her table is too close to the sidewalk. 6 inches too close. That's a code violation." Jennifer walked over and looked at the table position. Then she pulled up something on her phone. "Ma'am, residential garage sales are exempt from commercial sidewalk clearance requirements. There's no violation here. But the sign," Diane pointed at Rebecca's handwritten poster. "It's not the approved color." "There is no approved color for personal garage sale signs," Mike said patiently. "You might be thinking of commercial signage, which is different." Diane's voice got louder. "She's causing traffic problems. Look at all these cars." Rebecca glanced at the street. There were 3 cars parked along the curb. in a neighborhood where every house had at least 2 cars, 3 extra vehicles barely registered. "I don't see any traffic congestion," Jennifer said flatly, "and we haven't received any other complaints from neighbors about this sale." "Well, I'm complaining," Diane practically shouted. "I'm on the HOA board, and I'm telling you this is a problem." Mike closed his notepad and looked at Diane with the same expression Rebecca had seen him use on drunk people arguing about whether they were too drunk to drive, patient but firm. "Ma'am, with all due respect, Chief Walsh is the head of our city's detective division. She's been in law enforcement for over 20 years. She knows the local ordinances probably better than anyone in this neighborhood. If she says the garage sale is legal, it's legal." "I don't care if she's the governor." Diane's voice was shrill now. "Rules apply to everyone." "They do," Jennifer agreed, "and Chief Walsh has followed all of them. However, filing a false police report is actually a misdemeanor offense. We could cite you for that." The words hung in the air like a bomb that just went off. Diane's mouth fell open. Her face went from red to pale in about 2 seconds. "False report? I didn't. I'm not. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. By calling 911 about a legal garage sale?" Mike raised his eyebrows. "Ma'am, 911 is for emergencies. A permitted garage sale on a Saturday morning isn't an emergency." Rebecca finally spoke up, her voice calm and steady. "Officers, I don't want to press charges. I think this was just a misunderstanding. Mrs. Holbrook here was concerned about neighborhood standards. Maybe she was a bit overzealous, but I'm sure she meant well." She met Diane's eyes when she said it, and there was something in her expression that made it clear she was being generous, very generous. Diane seemed to realize she'd just been thrown a lifeline, but Diane's pride wouldn't let her take it. "I wasn't wrong," she insisted, her voice wavering. "The board will review this. I'll make sure they know about this mockery of our community standards." "You do that," Rebecca said quietly. "I'll be at the next board meeting." Jennifer and Mike exchanged glances. They'd clearly dealt with people like Diane before. Every neighborhood had one. The person who called the police about kids playing too loud, about dogs barking, about leaves blowing into their yard. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" Mike asked Diane. "Any actual emergency we need to address?" Diane looked around wildly, like she was searching for something, anything, to justify her call. But there was nothing. Just a peaceful garage sale on a Saturday morning. She grabbed her phone and her clipboard and marched back to her Mercedes without another word. The engine roared to life and she sped off down the street. As soon as she was gone, Mike let out a long breath. "Chief, I am so sorry about that. If we'd known it was you—" "Don't apologize," Rebecca cut him off. "You responded to a call and handled it professionally. That's exactly what you should do." Jennifer shook her head, a smile finally breaking through. "Wait until everyone at the station hears about this. Somebody called the cops on the chief of detectives for having a garage sale. Please don't make a big thing out of it," Rebecca said, but she was smiling too. "I just want to sell some old furniture and get to know my neighbors." "Too late," Mike grinned. "This is going in the shift report. Responded to disturbance call. Discovered complainant had reported Chief Walsh for following all applicable rules. Captain Rodriguez is going to love this." The three of them talked for a few more minutes, catching up on station gossip and a case Jennifer was working on. A few neighbors who'd been watching from their windows started coming out, now that the patrol car was leaving. They'd been curious before, but scared of Diane. Now they felt safe. Mr. Chen walked over with his wife. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Rebecca assured him. "Just a misunderstanding. Diane called the police on you?" Mrs. Chen looked outraged. "That woman has gone too far this time. We've all been putting up with her complaints for years, but this is ridiculous." Other neighbors started gathering around, and Rebecca heard the same story over and over. Diane had reported the Johnsons for their kid's basketball hoop being 2 feet over the property line. She'd filed a complaint about the Rodriguez family's Christmas lights being too bright. She'd even tried to ban the neighborhood kids from playing street hockey because it was dangerous and unsightly. "She made Mrs. Patterson cry last year," one woman said. Sent her a formal violation letter about her rose bushes being the wrong color. Said pink roses weren't in keeping with the neighborhood aesthetic. She reported my son's car for having a dent in the bumper, another man added. Said it was an eyesore. It's a small dent. The car runs fine. Rebecca listened to all of it, her detective brain cataloging the information. This wasn't just about her garage sale. Diane had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and everyone was too afraid to stand up to her because she had the HOA board backing her up. But something had changed today. Diane had finally picked a fight with someone who couldn't be intimidated. And from the looks on her neighbors' faces, they were all hoping this might be the turning point. The rest of the afternoon was actually pleasant. People bought things, chatted, and welcomed Rebecca to the neighborhood properly. By 2 o'clock, she'd sold most of what she wanted to get rid of and made about $200. But as she packed up the remaining items, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Diane Holbrook didn't seem like the type to back down quietly, and the next HOA board meeting was in 4 days. This was going to get interesting. The next 4 days were weird. Word had spread through Oakwood Heights faster than Rebecca thought possible. Apparently, calling the police on the police chief was the most exciting thing to happen in the neighborhood since the Hendersons' pool party got too loud last summer. Rebecca's doorbell kept ringing. Neighbors she hadn't met yet stopped by with welcome baskets, cookies, and casseroles, but really they just wanted to hear the story firsthand. She told it a dozen times, always keeping it simple and polite. She didn't trash-talk Diane, even though she could have. That wasn't her style. Mr. Chen visited every morning with coffee and updates. Apparently, Diane had gone completely silent. She wasn't answering emails, wasn't posting in the neighborhood Facebook group, and her car hadn't been seen leaving her house much. She's probably embarrassed, Mrs. Chen said on Tuesday morning. Good. Maybe she'll think twice before harassing people now. But Rebecca wasn't so sure. In her experience, people like Diane didn't just give up and slink away. They either learned and changed or they doubled down. And something told her Diane was the doubling down type. On Wednesday evening, Rebecca got an email from Tom Peterson, the HOA president. It was a reminder about the board meeting Thursday night at 7. All homeowners were welcome to attend. Then there was a second paragraph that seemed carefully worded. Given recent events, we expect higher attendance than usual. The board will be discussing several ongoing issues regarding HOA enforcement policies. Your presence would be appreciated. Rebecca read between the lines. They were going to deal with the Diane situation and they wanted her there. Fair enough. She'd cleared her schedule. Thursday came quickly. Rebecca got home from work at 6, changed out of her professional clothes into jeans and a sweater, and drove to the community center at the end of the neighborhood. She arrived at 6:45 expecting a small gathering. The parking lot was packed. Inside the community center, every seat was filled. People were standing along the walls. Rebecca recognized most of her neighbors, but there were also faces she'd never seen before. The whole neighborhood had shown up. Tom Peterson stood at the front near a table where 4 other board members sat. He looked nervous, shuffling papers and checking his watch. When he saw Rebecca, he gave her a small wave and pointed to a reserved seat in the front row. She sat down, feeling everyone's eyes on her. Diane was there too, sitting in the back corner with her arms crossed and her face set like stone. She didn't look at Rebecca, didn't look at anyone, just stared straight ahead like she was trying to will herself somewhere else. At exactly 7 o'clock, Tom called the meeting to order. He went through the usual boring stuff first. Budget reports, landscaping updates, pool maintenance schedules. People shifted in their seats, waiting for the real reason they'd all come. Finally, Tom cleared his throat and pulled out a different folder. Okay, now we need to address some concerns that have been raised about our complaint and enforcement procedures. The room went silent. Everyone leaned forward. 4 days ago, Tom continued, an incident occurred involving one of our board members and a new resident. I'm not going to name names, but I think we all know what I'm talking about. A few people glanced at Diane. She kept staring straight ahead. This incident prompted the board to review our complaint records for the past year, and what we found was concerning. Tom pulled out a thick stack of papers. In the past 12 months, we've received a total of 83 formal complaints from residents. That seems like a lot, right? Well, it gets more interesting when you look at who filed them. He held up the papers. 61 of these complaints came from one person. One board member, to be specific. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Diane's face was turning red, but she still didn't move. Another board member, a lawyer named David Chen, Mr. Chen's son, stood up. He had a serious expression and spoke in the kind of clear, measured voice lawyers use in courtrooms. "We investigated each of these 61 complaints thoroughly," David said. "We wanted to be fair and look at the facts. Here's what we found. 54 of those complaints were either completely unfounded or were about violations so minor they don't warrant formal action." He started listing examples, and with each one, Rebecca could see people in the audience nodding or whispering to each other. Complaint about Mr. Patterson's mailbox being the wrong shade of black. We measured. It was within approved color specifications. Complaint about the Rodriguez family's holiday decorations being too bright. We checked. They were using standard LED lights, same as everyone else. Complaint about Mrs. Sullivan's garden gnomes being inappropriate decorations. The HOA handbook doesn't regulate garden ornaments on private property. David went through 10 more examples. Each one sounded more ridiculous than the last. Complaining about a kid's bicycle being left in a driveway overnight. Reporting someone for having their garage door open too long. Filing a violation notice because someone's grass was a 1/4 inch taller than the recommended height. But here's the most concerning part, David continued. These complaints weren't just filed and forgotten. They were followed up with threatening letters, multiple emails, and in some cases, harassment of the residents involved. "Mrs. Patterson, would you mind standing up?" An elderly woman in the middle row stood up slowly. She looked uncomfortable with the attention. "Can you tell everyone what happened when you received a violation notice about your roses?" David asked gently. Mrs. Patterson's voice shook a little. "I got a letter saying my pink roses were not in the approved color palette for front yard gardens. It said I had 2 weeks to remove them or face a $500 fine. I've had those roses for 15 years. I planted them when my husband died. They were his favorite." Her voice cracked, and Mr. Chen's wife reached over to pat her hand. "The letter also included photos of my house taken from the street, with my roses circled in red marker," Mrs. Patterson continued. "It felt invasive, like I was being watched. I couldn't sleep for days worrying about it." "Did you remove the roses?" David asked. "I was going to," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "But then my son looked up the HOA rules. There is no approved color palette for roses. There's no rule about it at all." The complaint was made up. The room erupted in angry whispers. Rebecca watched Diane, who had gone from red to pale. Her hands were gripping the armrests of her chair. David held up his hand for quiet. "This is just one example. We found multiple cases of residents being threatened with fines for violations that don't actually exist in our bylaws. Some people paid fines. Others spent money removing or changing things that were perfectly legal." Tom took over again. "This is not what the HOA is supposed to be. We're supposed to maintain property values and help the community, not terrorize our neighbors over made-up rules." A man Rebecca recognized as Mr. Rodriguez stood up without being called on. "I want to say something. 2 years ago, my daughter was reported for having friends over after 9 p.m. on a weekend. The complaint said teenagers were causing a disturbance. You know what they were doing? Sitting on our porch talking and eating pizza. That's it. But we got a warning letter, and my daughter was so upset she didn't invite friends over for months." Another woman stood up. "I was reported for having my Christmas lights up past January 1st. The complaint said it was February 15th and they needed to come down immediately. But I'd taken them down on January 3rd. I had photos with timestamps. The complaint was filed anyway. More people started standing up, sharing their stories. It was like a dam had broken. For years, people had been dealing with Diane's complaints quietly, afraid to speak up because she was on the board. Now they were all talking at once, and the picture that emerged was clear. Diane had been making life miserable for dozens of families. Finally, Diane stood up. Her voice was loud and defensive. "I was enforcing the rules. Someone has to maintain standards in this neighborhood. If I didn't keep watch, this place would fall apart." "You weren't enforcing rules," David said firmly. "You were making them up. And when real rules existed, you were interpreting them in the strictest, most unreasonable way possible." "I care about this neighborhood," Diane shot back. "More than any of you. I've lived here for 18 years. I've given my time and energy to keeping this place nice. And this is the thanks I get." Tom stood up, and his voice was sad but firm. "Diane, caring about the neighborhood is good. But what you've been doing isn't care. It's control. And it's got to stop." "You can't tell me what to do," Diane said, her voice rising. "I'm on this board. I have rights. Not anymore, Tom said. The board voted yesterday. It was unanimous. You're being removed from your position, effective immediately. The room went silent. Diane looked like she'd been slapped. You can't do that. We can, and we did, David said. It's in the bylaws. Board members can be removed for conduct that harms the community. Your actions meet that criteria. Diane's eyes swept across the room looking for anyone who would support her. But everyone looked away. Even the people who used to be her friends couldn't meet her eyes. Then Diane's gaze landed on Rebecca, and suddenly all her anger focused in one direction. This is because of her. Diane pointed at Rebecca. You're all afraid of her because she's a cop. She moved in here and turned everyone against me. This is her fault. Rebecca stayed seated, her expression calm. She'd been yelled at by drug dealers, gang members, and people facing life in prison. An angry HOA board member didn't faze her. Mrs. Holbrook, Rebecca said quietly, I didn't turn anyone against you. I've been here less than 2 months. These complaints go back years. You don't belong here, Diane spat. This neighborhood was fine before you showed up? Tom stepped forward. That's enough, Diane. You need to leave now. I will not. You will, David said. Or we'll call security. For a moment it looked like Diane might argue more. But then something in her seemed to collapse. Her shoulders sagged and her face crumpled. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out. The door slammed behind her and everyone sat in stunned silence. Tom let out a long breath. Okay, that was unpleasant but necessary. Now the board is implementing new policies. From now on, any complaint must cite a specific rule in the handbook. No more vague accusations. And if someone files 3 unfounded complaints in a year, they'll face consequences instead of the people they're accusing. The meeting continued for another hour, but Rebecca barely heard it. She kept thinking about Diane's face as she left. That look of betrayal and confusion. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why everyone was upset with her. As people filed out after the meeting, dozens of neighbors stopped to thank Rebecca. Like she'd done something heroic. But she hadn't. She'd just had a garage sale and followed the rules. Everything else had been building up for years, waiting for someone to finally push back. Still, as she drove home that night, Rebecca felt good. Not because Diane had been kicked off the board, but because maybe now the neighborhood could actually be the friendly place it was supposed to be. The weekend after the board meeting, something strange happened in Oakwood Heights. Kids started playing street hockey again. The Rodriguez family put up string lights on their porch even though it wasn't a holiday. Mr. Patterson planted yellow roses next to his pink ones. Small acts of rebellion that shouldn't have been rebellious at all. Rebecca watched it happen from her front porch Saturday morning. The neighborhood felt different. Lighter somehow. People walked their dogs without looking over their shoulders. Parents let their kids leave bikes in the driveway overnight. It was like everyone had been holding their breath for years and could finally exhale. But not everyone was celebrating. Rebecca noticed Diane's silver Mercedes hadn't moved from her driveway in 3 days. The curtains were drawn. No one had seen her. A few neighbors mentioned it to Rebecca, their voices mixing concern with lingering anger. Nobody knew quite how to feel. She brought it on herself, Mrs. Chen said on Saturday afternoon, bringing over fresh cookies. But still, I wonder if she's okay. I mean, I'm not saying what she did was right, but being humiliated like that in front of everyone. Rebecca had been thinking about that too. She'd seen it before in her line of work. People who did wrong things, hurt people, broke laws. They still had feelings, still had breaking points, and Diane had definitely hit hers. Sunday afternoon, Rebecca made a decision. She baked banana bread using her grandmother's recipe, wrapped it in foil, and walked 3 houses down to Diane's place. She stood on the porch for a minute, questioning whether this was a good idea. Then she rang the doorbell. Nothing happened for almost a full minute. Rebecca was about to leave when she heard footsteps. The door opened a crack and Diane's face appeared. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair uncombed, eyes red and puffy. When she saw Rebecca, her expression went from cautious to hostile. What do you want? Her voice was hoarse. Rebecca held up the banana bread. Just wanted to check in. Thought you might like this. Diane stared at the bread like it might be poisoned. Is this some kind of joke? Did the neighbors send you to gloat? No one sent me. I came on my own. Why? The word came out bitter. You won. You got me kicked off the board. Everyone hates me. What more do you want? Rebecca took a breath. Can I come in? Just for a few minutes. Absolutely not. Okay, then can we talk out here? Diane hesitated, then stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself even though it was warm outside. She looked small and defeated. Nothing like the confident woman who'd marched up Rebecca's driveway 2 weeks ago. They stood in silence for a moment. Rebecca set the banana bread on the porch railing. I didn't come here to gloat, Rebecca said finally, and I didn't get you kicked off the board. Your own actions did that. Diane's jaw tightened. Easy for you to say. You moved in, caused trouble, and turned everyone against me. I had a garage sale, Diane, that's all. Everything that happened after that was already in motion. You'd been filing complaints for years. Because someone needed to. Diane's voice cracked. Someone needed to care about this place. Everyone else was just letting things slide. Broken mailboxes, ugly decorations, people parking wherever they wanted. I was trying to maintain standards. Rebecca leaned against the porch railing. Can I tell you something? In my job, I deal with a lot of people who think they're doing the right thing but end up hurting others. They convince themselves that their way is the only way, and anyone who disagrees is wrong or lazy or doesn't care enough. Diane said nothing, but she was listening. The thing is, Rebecca continued, most of those people aren't evil. They're scared. Scared of losing control, scared of change, scared of being powerless. So they grab onto whatever power they can find and hold it tight. I'm not scared, Diane said, but her voice wavered. Everyone's scared of something. Diane was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft Rebecca almost didn't hear it. My husband died 5 years ago, cancer, it was fast. 3 months from diagnosis to... She trailed off. I'm sorry, Rebecca said. We'd been married 32 years. He was my whole world. We never had kids, it was always just us. And then suddenly it wasn't. Diane's hands were shaking. This neighborhood was something we built together. He was on the HOA board for years. He cared about this place. She wiped her eyes roughly. After he died, I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't work, couldn't focus. The house felt empty. So I threw myself into the HOA, into keeping things perfect. Because if I could control something, anything, maybe I wouldn't feel so powerless, Rebecca finished quietly. Diane nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I know I went too far. I know I hurt people. But I didn't know how to stop. Every complaint, every violation I found, it gave me something to focus on besides the fact that my husband was gone, and I was completely alone. Rebecca understood more than Diane knew. She'd seen it in her daughter after the divorce. That need to control small things when the big things fell apart. Amy had reorganized her room obsessively for months, color-coding everything, freaking out if something was out of place. You're not alone, Rebecca said. This neighborhood is full of people who would have supported you if you'd let them. But instead you pushed them away. I know, Diane whispered. And now they all hate me. They don't hate you. They're hurt and angry, yes, but hate? No. People don't show up to a board meeting in those numbers just because they hate someone. They show up because they care about their community. And they wanted things to change. Diane looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Why are you being nice to me? I called the police on you. I tried to shut down your garage sale. I said terrible things about you. Rebecca shrugged. Because I've been doing this job long enough to know that hurting people usually hurt themselves first. And because holding grudges is exhausting. They stood together in silence watching the neighborhood. Kids riding bikes, someone washing their car. Normal weekend stuff that should have always been just normal. I don't know how to fix this, Diane said finally. Start small, Rebecca suggested. Apologize to the people you hurt most. Not a grand gesture, just honest apologies. It won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. They won't forgive me. Some might not, at least not right away. But some will. People are more understanding than you think if you're genuinely trying to change. Diane picked up the banana bread, holding it carefully. Thank you for this. And for talking to me. You're welcome. And Diane, consider getting some help. A therapist, a grief counselor, someone. What you went through with your husband, that's heavy stuff. It's okay to not be okay with it. Diane nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Rebecca left, but she couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. That night she told her daughter Amy about it while they made dinner together. So the mean HOA lady was just sad. Amy asked, chopping vegetables. It's more complicated than that, Rebecca said. Being sad doesn't excuse hurting people. But understanding why someone acts a certain way helps. Are you going to be friends with her now? Rebecca laughed. I don't know about friends, but maybe we can be civil neighbors. Over the next week, Rebecca noticed small changes. Diane's curtains opened. Her car started moving again. And one evening, Rebecca saw her on Mrs. Patterson's porch, the two of them talking. It was a short conversation, and Mrs. Patterson didn't invite her in. But it was something. Mr. Chen told Rebecca later that Diane had stopped by his house too, apologizing for the garbage can incident and about a dozen other complaints over the years. She looked terrible, he said. But she seemed genuine. I told her I appreciated the apology. Not everyone was so forgiving. The Rodriguez family wouldn't answer the door when Diane knocked. The Hendersons told her they needed more time. That was fair. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. But slowly, very slowly, things started to shift. At the next HOA meeting, Diane showed up and sat in the back. She didn't say anything, just listened. Tom acknowledged her presence with a polite nod, nothing more. Baby steps. Rebecca also noticed changes in the neighborhood dynamics. People were friendlier, more relaxed. They started organizing things again. Block parties, holiday decorations contests, a neighborhood watch that was actually about safety instead of spying on each other. And Rebecca found herself right in the middle of it. Not because she was a detective chief, but just because she was a neighbor. She helped Mr. Chen set up a community garden in an unused lot. She gave a safety presentation at the elementary school Amy attended. She joined the book club Mrs. Patterson ran. One Saturday, almost a month after the garage sale incident, Rebecca was in her front yard planting flowers when she saw Diane walking up the street. Diane paused at the end of Rebecca's driveway, hesitant. The tulips look nice, Diane said awkwardly. Thanks. I'm not much of a gardener, but I'm trying. If you want, I could give you some tips. I used to help my husband with the garden before. I'd like that, Rebecca said. Diane nodded and continued her walk, but there was something lighter in her step. Later that evening, Tom called Rebecca. I wanted to thank you, he said, for whatever you said to Diane. She's been making real efforts to apologize and change. I didn't think she had it in her. Everyone's capable of change if they want it badly enough, Rebecca said. The question is whether they want it. Well, she seems to. The board is talking about letting her volunteer for the garden committee. No power, just helping out. Testing the waters. That sounds like a good idea. After hanging up, Rebecca sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over Oakwood Heights. Moving here had been about finding peace, getting away from the chaos of the job. She'd found that, but she'd also found something else. A real community. Messy, complicated, but real. And sometimes, Rebecca thought, the biggest victories weren't about catching criminals or solving cases. Sometimes they were about helping people find their way back from the worst versions of themselves. That was worth moving for. 3 months later, Oakwood Heights was barely recognizable. Not in how it looked, but in how it felt. The spring weather had brought everyone outside, and the neighborhood was alive with activity. Kids played without being shushed. Dogs barked happily at passing joggers. Someone's music drifted from a backyard without anyone complaining about noise levels. Rebecca stood in her driveway on a Saturday morning, setting up tables again. But this time it wasn't just her garage sale. It was the neighborhood's first community-wide yard sale, an idea that had come up at last month's HOA meeting. 15 families were participating, all setting up on the same day to attract more buyers. Amy was helping her arrange items, mostly complaining about having to wake up early. I don't understand why people want to buy other people's old stuff, she muttered. Placing books on a table. One person's trash is another person's treasure, Rebecca said, using the phrase her own mother had told her years ago. That's such a mom thing to say, Rebecca laughed. Well, I am a mom. Mr. Chen walked over from his driveway 3 houses down carrying a cooler. I brought lemonade for everyone. Figure people will get thirsty. You didn't have to do that, Rebecca said. I wanted to. Besides, this was a great idea. Whole neighborhood coming together like this. He set the cooler down and looked around. You know, I've lived here 20 years and I don't think I've ever seen people this relaxed. Mrs. Patterson came by next, pushing a cart full of vintage dishes. Rebecca, dear, could you help me set up? My back isn't what it used to be. They spent the next 20 minutes arranging Mrs. Patterson's collection of china and glassware. The elderly woman chatted the whole time about her grandchildren, her garden, and how much nicer the neighborhood felt lately. "I actually look forward to checking my mail now," she said. "For years I dreaded it because there might be another violation notice." Can you imagine? Dreading your own mailbox? Rebecca could imagine it. She'd seen how fear could poison everyday life, how people could turn their own homes into prisons trying to follow impossible rules. By 8 o'clock, cars were pulling up and early bird shoppers were walking between driveways. The atmosphere was festive, almost like a block party. Someone had set up a speaker playing oldies music. The Rodriguez kids were selling homemade cookies for $1 each. Then around 9, Rebecca saw Diane's silver Mercedes driving slowly down the street. Her stomach tightened. Diane had been making progress, but she still wasn't fully accepted by everyone. This could be awkward. The car pulled over and Diane got out. She was dressed casually, jeans and a simple blouse. Nothing like the designer outfits she used to wear like armor. She walked up to Rebecca's driveway carrying a potted plant. "I heard about the community sale," Diane said, her voice tentative. "I wasn't sure if I should participate, but I wanted to bring this. For the raffle." Tom had organized a raffle for the end of the day, with donated items going to raise money for the community garden. Diane was offering to contribute. "That's really nice," Rebecca said, taking the plant. It was a beautiful orchid, clearly expensive. "I'll add it to the prize table." I was also wondering if maybe I could help out. "I know I'm not exactly welcome at these things yet, but I thought—" Diane trailed off, looking uncertain. Before Rebecca could answer, Mr. Chen called out from his driveway. "Diane, could you come look at this?" "I can't remember what this kitchen gadget is called, and you always knew about cooking stuff." Diane's face showed surprise, then something like relief. She walked over to help him, and soon they were discussing vintage kitchen tools with an actual customer. Mrs. Patterson leaned over to Rebecca. "I talked to Tom about giving her a chance. She's been trying so hard. It seemed cruel to keep shutting her out." "That's generous of you," Rebecca said, "especially after what she put you through." "Well, you showed me something when you reached out to her. You showed all of us that people deserve second chances." Mrs. Patterson adjusted a teacup on her display. "Besides, my husband always said holding grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." The morning passed quickly. Shoppers came and went, haggling good-naturedly over prices. Rebecca sold most of Amy's old toys and some furniture she'd replaced. But more than the selling, she enjoyed watching the neighborhood interact. The Rodriguez family's youngest daughter fell and scraped her knee. 3 neighbors rushed over to help. Mrs. Chen shared her homemade egg rolls with everyone. Someone's dog got loose and half the block helped catch it, laughing the whole time, and Diane was part of it all. Not leading, not controlling, just participating. She helped Mrs. Patterson load purchases into customers' cars. She admired the cookies the Rodriguez kids were selling and bought 6. She even laughed when Mr. Chen told a terrible joke about a garage sale and a garbage sale. Around noon, Officer Mike Reeves and Officer Jennifer Torres drove by on patrol. They slowed down and rolled down the window. "Chief, having another sale?" Mike called out, grinning. "Whole neighborhood's doing it this time," Rebecca called back. "Want some lemonade?" They parked and got out, joining the crowd. A few people looked nervous seeing police uniforms, but Mike and Jennifer were so friendly and casual that everyone relaxed quickly. They ended up buying some items themselves and stayed for 20 minutes just chatting with neighbors. When they were leaving, Jennifer pulled Rebecca aside. "Captain Rodriguez wanted me to tell you that the whole station is impressed with what you've done here. Turning a complaint call into a complete neighborhood transformation." "I didn't do anything special," Rebecca protested. "I just had a garage sale. You did more than that. You stood up to a bully and then showed her compassion when no one else would. That takes real strength." Jennifer glanced at Diane, who was helping someone load a lamp into their trunk. "And look at her now. That's because of you." After the officers left, Rebecca thought about that. She hadn't set out to transform anything or anyone. She just wanted to sell some old furniture and start fresh in a new place. But somehow everything had changed anyway. By 2 o'clock, most of the good stuff was sold. People started packing up their remaining items to donate. Tom gathered everyone for the raffle drawing. They'd raised $300 for the community garden, which was more than anyone expected. Diane's orchid was one of the prizes, And when a young couple won it, they made a point of thanking Diane personally. She looked like she might cry. As people dispersed, Diane approached Rebecca one more time. "Thank you for today. For letting me be part of this. You're part of this neighborhood, Diane. You always were. You just forgot for a while." "I did more than forget. I became someone I'm ashamed of." "But you're not that person anymore," Rebecca pointed out. "And that's what matters," Diane nodded slowly. "I started seeing a therapist. Like you suggested. It's helping. She says I was using control as a way to manage grief, and I went too far. It takes courage to admit that. And to get help. I've also been volunteering at the community garden twice a week. It's nice to work with plants again. Makes me feel close to my husband, but in a healthy way." Diane smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. He would have loved this community sale. He always wanted to do something like this. They talked for a few more minutes before Diane left. As Rebecca watched her drive away, she felt a sense of satisfaction that was different from solving a case or closing an investigation. This was personal. This was real life. Amy came out of the house with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Made these for us. Figured you earned it." They sat on the porch steps together, watching the neighborhood settle back into quiet afternoon mode. The Rodriguez kids were playing basketball. Mr. Chen was watering his garden. Everything felt normal in the best possible way. "Mom," Amy said after a while, "do you miss your old apartment?" Rebecca thought about it. The cramped space, the sirens at night, the lack of community. "No," she said honestly. "Not even a little bit. Me neither. This place feels like home." That night, after Amy went to bed, Rebecca sat on her porch with a cup of tea. The street was quiet under the glow of streetlights. A few houses down, she could see Diane sitting on her own porch reading a book. Rebecca thought about that first day, about Diane marching up her driveway with righteous anger and a clipboard, about the police being called and the board meeting and all the drama that followed. If someone had told her then that 3 months later they'd be working together at a community sale, she would have laughed. But that was the thing about people. They surprised you. They changed. They grew. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Great turnout today. Already had 3 families ask about the next one. Think we should make it quarterly?" Rebecca typed back, "Sounds perfect." She looked around her neighborhood at the houses with lights glowing warmly in windows, at the peaceful street where kids had left their bikes lying in yards without fear. This was what she'd wanted when she moved here. Not just peace and quiet, but real community, and somehow, through a garage sale and a conflict with an overzealous HOA member, she'd found exactly that. Rebecca finished her tea and went inside, locking the door behind her. Tomorrow she'd go back to being Detective Chief Walsh, handling cases and managing her team. But tonight and every night after, she was just Rebecca, a neighbor, a member of a community that had learned to support each other instead of tearing each other down, all because someone called the police on a garage sale. She smiled at the irony of it all. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people who challenged us the most ended up teaching us the most important lessons. As she climbed the stairs to bed, Rebecca felt grateful. Grateful for her daughter, for her new home, for neighbors who'd become friends. And yes, even grateful for Diane Holbrook, because without that confrontation, none of this transformation would have happened. Oakwood Heights wasn't perfect. No place was. But it was better, kinder, more forgiving, and that was enough.